Most people believe that silence means someone has stopped caring. They assume that when you stop calling, stop texting, or stop chasing, the other person simply shrugs their shoulders and moves on. But human emotions don't work that way, especially when there was a genuine emotional connection. Sometimes your silence speaks with a voice louder than any argument ever could. It raises questions that no conversation ever answered. It creates a space where the mind begins searching for meaning. And when feelings are real, that search becomes impossible to ignore. Think about it for a moment. When everything suddenly becomes quiet, the heart doesn't automatically become calm. In fact, it often becomes louder. A woman who once knew your routines, expected your messages, and shared small moments with you suddenly notices an empty space where your presence used to be. That absence doesn't just disappear into the background. It demands attention. It makes her wonder what changed, what she missed, and whether the distance between you was caused by something she never noticed. The mind dislikes unanswered questions. It wants clarity. It wants certainty. But silence offers neither. Instead, it invites imagination to take over. She begins replaying conversations in her head. She remembers little details that seemed unimportant before. She starts asking herself if there was a moment she should have handled differently. Was there a message she misunderstood? Did she say something that pushed you away? Could she have shown more appreciation? These questions don't always come because she is insecure. They come because people naturally search for explanations when someone who mattered suddenly becomes quiet. Now understand something important. This isn't about playing games or trying to make someone suffer. This is about recognizing how emotional connection works. When someone has invested their heart, silence doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy. It becomes a mirror reflecting every emotion that was hidden beneath the surface. Feelings that were once ignored suddenly become impossible to escape. Many women will never admit this out loud. They continue living their lives. They go to work. They spend time with friends. They smile in pictures. From the outside, everything looks completely normal. But emotions rarely announce themselves to the world. The strongest battles often happen behind a smile. There are moments when she reaches for her phone without realizing it. Moments when she wonders if your name will appear on the screen. Moments when she tells herself she doesn't care, only to realize she's still thinking about you hours later. That is the power of silence. It doesn't force emotions. It reveals them. And here's where many people make a serious mistake. They think silence is a weapon to control another person's feelings. It isn't. If your silence comes from pride, manipulation, or the desire to make someone beg for your attention, eventually it loses its meaning. Real emotional impact doesn't come from calculated distance. It comes when your absence naturally exposes the value of your presence. There is a difference between disappearing to punish someone and stepping back because respect, peace, or emotional balance requires it. When someone truly valued you, your silence creates reflection before it creates acceptance. It causes them to examine the relationship from a different perspective. They begin noticing what they once overlooked. They recognize conversations they took for granted. They appreciate moments that felt ordinary while they were happening. Sometimes people only understand the weight of your presence after they experience the weight of your absence. So before you assume she feels nothing because she says nothing, remember this: silence often reaches places that words never could. Because sometimes the loudest message you'll ever send is the one you never speak. After the silence settles in, something even more powerful begins to happen. The real battle is no longer between you and her, it is happening inside her own mind. And that battle is often far more exhausting than anything either of you ever said out loud. The human mind has a remarkable way of trying to complete unfinished stories. When there are no answers, it creates its own. When there is no explanation, it starts searching for one. That is why uncertainty can become more painful than rejection itself. A woman who genuinely cared doesn't simply wake up one morning and erase every emotion because communication stopped. Instead, she begins connecting dots that may not even belong together. She remembers your last conversation and listens to it again in her memory. She replays your expressions, your words, your pauses, and even your silence before the silence. She wonders if there was a hidden meaning she failed to notice. She questions whether the ending started long before she realized it. This is what uncertainty does. It invites overthinking into every quiet moment. She may ask herself, did I expect too much? Then a few hours later, another question appears. Maybe I wasn't supportive enough. The next day, she wonders if she became too available. Then she convinces herself that perhaps she should have been more patient. The questions continue changing, but they all lead back to the same place, a search for certainty that silence refuses to provide. Understand this carefully. These thoughts are not always a sign of weakness. They are a sign that the connection mattered. People rarely spend sleepless nights trying to understand someone who meant nothing to them. Emotional investment naturally creates emotional reflection. The deeper the connection, the deeper the questions become. But there is another side to this that many people never see. While she is questioning herself, she is also fighting to protect her dignity. She doesn't want to appear desperate. She doesn't want to chase someone who may have already decided to walk away. So she carries two completely different conversations at the same time. One is happening inside her heart, asking for clarity. The other is happening inside her mind, reminding her to stay strong. Those two voices rarely agree with each other. One voice whispers, send the message. The other says, if he wanted to talk, he already would have. One tells her to reach out. The other tells her to protect her self-respect. That emotional tug of war can become mentally exhausting. She may smile throughout the day while carrying questions no one around her ever hears. Friends may ask if everything is okay, and she says yes because explaining emotional uncertainty is harder than pretending it doesn't exist. This is why silence often creates invisible pain. It leaves room for assumptions, and assumptions are rarely kind. The mind almost always fills empty spaces with fear before it fills them with hope. Instead of believing everything is fine, people often imagine the worst. They convince themselves they were never enough, even when the truth may be something entirely different. Yet here's something many fail to recognize. Growth sometimes begins in these uncomfortable moments. As painful as uncertainty feels, it forces self-reflection. She begins looking at the relationship more honestly. She starts recognizing her own emotional patterns, her own expectations, and her own needs. The questions that once felt like punishment slowly become lessons. And while those lessons may arrive through pain, they often leave behind wisdom that lasts much longer than the hurt itself. That's why silence doesn't just test emotions, it exposes them. It reveals the fears that words were hiding, the hopes that pride refused to admit, and the depth of feelings that everyday conversations often covered up. Because sometimes the hardest battle isn't losing someone, it's trying to understand why they became silent. As those unanswered questions continue to grow, another emotion quietly steps into the picture: pride. And pride is one of the most misunderstood forces in any relationship. People often mistake it for a lack of love, when in reality it can exist because the feelings are so deep. The stronger the emotions, the greater the fear of being rejected. That is why someone can be hurting inside while refusing to show even the smallest sign of it. A woman who genuinely cared may never admit how much your silence affects her. Not because she doesn't feel it, but because she doesn't want to appear vulnerable in front of someone who might no longer choose her. There is a difference between wanting someone back and wanting to protect your own heart. When those two desires collide, pride usually becomes the shield. From the outside, she appears completely fine. She continues with her routine. She goes to work, laughs with friends, posts pictures, and carries on with life as though nothing has changed. To everyone around her, she seems confident and unaffected. But appearances can be incredibly convincing. Social media doesn't reveal the moments when she pauses before going to sleep. It doesn't show the conversations she has with herself. It doesn't capture the seconds when your name crosses her mind for no obvious reason. Never assume that someone's silence means they have forgotten you. Sometimes they remember you every single day, they've simply decided not to tell you. This is where many people become confused. They expect emotions to be obvious. They think if someone misses them, they will call. If someone cares, they will text. If someone loves them, they will always fight. But real life is far more complicated than that. Emotions are filtered through fear, dignity, past experiences, and self-respect. A person can desperately want to reach out while convincing themselves that they shouldn't. Imagine standing at the edge of a bridge, wanting to cross but fearing that the other side no longer exists. That is what emotional uncertainty feels like. Every message she thinks about sending carries the risk of being ignored. Every attempt to reconnect carries the possibility of hearing nothing in return. And sometimes that possibility feels more painful than staying silent. So she chooses silence, too. Not because she has stopped caring, because she is trying to survive the possibility of rejection. There are moments when she picks up her phone, opens your conversation, stares at the screen, and then closes it again without typing a single word. There are moments when she wonders how you are doing, but convinces herself that asking would only make her look weak. She tells herself to stay strong, to move forward, to let go. Yet the heart rarely follows instructions as quickly as the mind gives them. This is why silence can become contagious. One person waits for the other waits for the first. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Neither one truly understands what the other is feeling because both are protecting themselves behind the same invisible wall. And here's the lesson that changes everything. Strength is not pretending you don't care. Strength is having emotions without allowing them to control your self-worth. A woman with self-respect doesn't chase endlessly because she understands that love cannot be forced. She knows that constantly proving her value to someone who refuses to see it only creates deeper wounds. So even while her heart whispers your name, her dignity reminds her that love should never require begging for attention. That doesn't mean the pain disappears overnight. It simply means she chooses to carry it with grace instead of desperation. She learns to smile while healing. She learns to keep moving even when part of her still wishes things had turned out differently. And in that quiet struggle, she becomes stronger than anyone around her realizes. So if you ever mistake her silence for indifference, you may completely misunderstand what is really happening beneath the surface. Because sometimes the strongest silence isn't the absence of love, it's the presence of self-respect. After the struggle between emotions and pride, something begins to shift. The silence is no longer just creating questions. It starts creating perspective. There is a remarkable truth about human nature that many people discover too late. We often recognize the true value of someone only after their presence is no longer part of our everyday lives. As long as something is consistently there, we can unintentionally treat it as ordinary. We assume it will always remain. We stop noticing the small things because they become familiar. But the moment they disappear, the ordinary suddenly becomes unforgettable. This is where absence becomes one of life's greatest teachers. When you were present, perhaps your messages felt routine. Your concern felt expected. Your consistency became normal. She may not have realized how much peace your presence brought because she never had to imagine life without it. But once the silence arrives, the mind begins making comparisons. It starts remembering things that once seemed too small to appreciate. A simple "how was your day?" suddenly carries more meaning than it ever did before. A random conversation becomes a cherished memory. The little habits that once blended into everyday life suddenly stand out because they are no longer there. That is how appreciation is often born, not in abundance, but in absence. This doesn't happen because someone enjoys suffering. It happens because the human heart notices empty spaces more than full ones. We become aware of what is missing long before we celebrate what is present. And when someone truly mattered, their absence creates an emotional contrast that cannot be ignored. She may find herself revisiting places that remind her of you. A song she once barely noticed suddenly carries emotions she never expected. A familiar calf, a certain time of day, or even a simple phrase someone else says can unexpectedly bring your memory rushing back. These moments aren't planned. They simply happen because meaningful connections leave quiet fingerprints on everyday life. What's interesting is that memories rarely return in perfect order. The mind doesn't replay the entire relationship from beginning to end. Instead, it gathers small moments. The way you listened when she was overwhelmed, the encouragement you gave when she doubted herself, the laughter over something completely insignificant, the comfort of knowing someone genuinely cared. Those ordinary moments become extraordinary because they can no longer be experienced in the present. This is why absence has such emotional power. It strips away distractions, it removes daily routines, and leaves only the truth of what someone actually meant to you. But there is another lesson hidden inside this silence. Sometimes distance doesn't just reveal another person's value, it reveals your own. When someone steps away, it creates an opportunity to ask difficult but necessary questions. Was the relationship built on appreciation or convenience? Were both people giving equally, or was one carrying the emotional weight alone? Did love become predictable instead of intentional? These questions are uncomfortable, yet they often become the foundation for personal growth. And growth changes the way people see everything. She begins realizing that certain moments she once overlooked were actually acts of love. She notices that consistency is rare. Genuine attention is valuable. Emotional safety is not something to take for granted. What once felt ordinary now appears precious because she understands what life feels like without it. However, this realization should never become an excuse to disappear simply to make someone miss you. Love is not strengthened by emotional games. Healthy relationships are not built on creating artificial distance. The deepest appreciation comes naturally when two people recognize each other's value without manipulation. If absence reveals love, it should do so honestly, not as part of a strategy to control someone's emotions. The greatest relationships are not the ones where people constantly test each other's feelings. They are the ones where both people learn to value each other before silence becomes necessary. Because appreciation delayed often arrives carrying the weight of regret. And sometimes the quietest distance reveals the loudest truth about what someone truly meant to your heart. Because absence doesn't create love, it simply uncovers the love that was already there. But there is something you must never overlook. While silence can reveal hidden emotions, it also has a limit. There comes a moment when what once created reflection begins creating distance instead. This is the turning point that many people fail to recognize. They believe that if someone truly cares, they will keep waiting forever. But no heart, no matter how loving, can remain suspended in uncertainty indefinitely. Even the deepest emotions eventually begin searching for peace. At first, your silence may have caused her to wonder where you went. She replayed old conversations. She questioned herself. She held on to hope that maybe tomorrow would bring clarity. Then tomorrow became next week. Next week became next month. Without realizing it, hope slowly started changing its shape. It became quieter, it became more cautious, and eventually it began preparing itself for a future that no longer included you. That transformation rarely happens overnight. People imagine healing as one dramatic decision, but in reality, healing usually arrives in small, unnoticed moments. One day she wakes up and realizes she didn't think about you first thing in the morning. Another day she laughs without forcing it. Then she goes an entire afternoon without checking her phone, wondering if your message finally arrived. Those moments seem insignificant, but together they become the bridge between heartbreak and acceptance. This is why silence is so dangerous when it lasts too long. In the beginning, silence keeps someone emotionally connected because they are still searching for answers. But eventually, the search becomes exhausting. The heart grows tired of asking questions that never receive a response. The mind becomes weary of creating explanations that may never be true. And when emotional exhaustion reaches its limit, something unexpected happens. The need for closure becomes stronger than the hope of reconciliation. She begins accepting what she once refused to believe, not because she suddenly stopped loving you, but because she finally understands that waiting forever is not an act of love toward herself. She starts choosing peace over uncertainty. She realizes that protecting her emotional well-being is not giving up, it is growing up. Many people misunderstand this stage. They think that because she has stopped reaching out, stopped mentioning your name, or stopped reacting the way she once did, it means she never cared. In reality, it often means she cared so deeply that she had no choice but to heal. There is a huge difference between forgetting someone and learning to live without them. One erases memories. The other simply refuses to let those memories control the future. This is where emotional detachment quietly begins. She still remembers what you shared. She still appreciates the good moments, but she no longer builds her happiness around the possibility that you'll return. The emotional energy she once invested in waiting begins flowing back into herself. She focuses on her goals, her friendships, her family, and the life she wants to create. Slowly, the empty space your silence created becomes filled with new experiences, new confidence, and a stronger sense of self. And here's the truth that surprises many people. Sometimes, by the time someone decides to come back, the person they left behind has already become someone new. Not colder, not bitter, simply stronger. She no longer needs the answers that once kept her awake. She no longer depends on the message she once hoped would appear. She has discovered that peace doesn't always come from hearing an explanation. Sometimes peace comes from accepting that not every chapter receives the ending we imagined. That is why using silence as a strategy to test someone's love is such a dangerous mistake. You may believe you're creating longing, while in reality, you're teaching them how to survive without you. Every day of unnecessary distance gives the heart another opportunity to adapt. Every unanswered moment becomes another lesson in letting go. If love is real, it deserves honesty, not endless uncertainty. It deserves courage, not emotional games. Because once someone has truly found peace without you, they rarely return to the version of themselves that was willing to wait forever. Because silence can awaken love, but too much silence teaches the heart how to let go. After everything we've explored, the confusion, the overthinking, the pride, the painful lessons of absence, and the quiet process of healing, we arrive at the most important truth of all. This conversation has never really been about silence. Silence was only the doorway. The real lesson has always been about emotional maturity. Because in the end, the strongest relationships are not built on who can stay silent the longest. They are built on who has the courage to communicate with honesty, respect, and consistency. Many people spend years trying to master the psychology of attraction. They search for techniques, strategies, and hidden secrets that promise to make someone miss them, chase them, or fall more deeply in love. But lasting love has never been created by emotional games. It grows where two people feel safe enough to be real with each other. It grows where trust is stronger than fear, where conversations replace assumptions, and where respect becomes more important than winning. Think about the healthiest relationships you've ever seen. They aren't perfect. They don't exist without disagreements or misunderstandings. But they have one thing that keeps them alive. When something feels wrong, both people are willing to face it instead of hiding behind silence. They understand that avoiding difficult conversations may protect the ego for a moment, but it slowly damages the connection they worked so hard to build. Real strength is not making someone wonder if they still matter. Real strength is making someone feel secure enough that they never have to question it. That doesn't mean you should ignore your own boundaries or tolerate behavior that hurts your peace. Emotional maturity is not about accepting everything. It is about responding with wisdom instead of reacting with pride. Sometimes that means speaking honestly. Sometimes it means walking away with respect. And sometimes it means recognizing that love alone cannot fix a relationship where trust and communication no longer exist. A woman who truly values herself is not searching for perfection. She is searching for consistency. She wants to know that your words match your actions. She wants to feel that when life becomes difficult, you will communicate instead of disappearing. She wants a relationship where problems become conversations instead of silent battles. Because emotional safety is built one honest moment at a time. The same is true for you. You also deserve someone who listens, someone who values your presence, and someone who chooses understanding over assumptions. Healthy relationships are never one-sided. They are partnerships where both people are willing to grow. Both people are willing to apologize when necessary. Both people are willing to learn from mistakes instead of repeating them. Love becomes powerful not because two perfect people found each other, but because two imperfect people decide that respect will always be greater than their pride. Life is too short to spend it wondering who should send the first message. Too many beautiful relationships have ended because two hearts waited for the other to make the first move. Too many opportunities for happiness have disappeared because silence was allowed to speak louder than love. Pride may protect the ego today, but honesty has the power to protect the relationship tomorrow. If someone genuinely matters to you, don't make them decode your feelings through distance. Don't expect them to read your mind when you have the ability to speak from your heart. The strongest people are not those who hide their emotions. The strongest people are those who express them with confidence, kindness, and self-respect. And if a relationship has reached the point where communication is no longer possible, then let your departure carry dignity instead of resentment. Leave without revenge. Leave without manipulation. Leave knowing that you gave honesty a chance before choosing peace. Because the goal of love is never to control another person's emotions. The goal is to create a connection where both people become better because they chose each other every single day. At the end of it all, remember this one truth that can transform every relationship you will ever have. Because silence may reveal the heart, but only honest communication has the power to keep two hearts together.